But first, a wild new global warming scheme. Now, the only thing about this one is that it punishes people silly enough and vain enough to think they're saving the planet by buying an electric car. It's a scheme that's generated headlines like this: could electric cars help prevent blackouts? When in fact the exact opposite seems more likely. Now, what's caused this excitement is a paper this week by an Australian National University team of academics. Now, their plan is fiendishly simple. How about saving our electricity system from blackouts by stealing the power in people's EV batteries, the batteries of their electric cars? Let's steal that power from the batteries of electric cars exactly when there's some kind of calamity, a big storm maybe that's knocked down power lines, destabilise the system, or maybe a bushfire that you might actually be desperate to flee. You jump in your electric car and uh-oh. Now, this ANU study is based on a test these academics did when storms knocked down power lines in Victoria early this year, just when the state was already short of electricity because of a broken power generator. Wind farms also went offline. The system couldn't handle all the yo-yoing and shut down parts of Melbourne. But up in Canberra, 16 electric cars tried to do their little bit to help.
A new study has found EVs could prevent power outages spreading to tens of thousands of homes during emergency outages. Now, the report comes from the Australian National University and showed how a fleet of just 16 EVs charging across Canberra was able to rebalance the power during a major blackout in Melbourne earlier this year.
Wow, the batteries of just 16 cars could save Melbourne from a major blackout? Well, they couldn't, and they sure didn't. And 90,000 homes were without power, some for days. But such engineering ignorance has many people these days cheering for an electricity system that's totally powered by wind and solar. They don't know how impossible that is either. Anyway, the lead author of that ANU paper is Dr. Bjorn Sternberg. And he said, well, actually, no, these cars didn't produce that much electricity at all. But, he has ways of turning this little success into making a real difference.
We had 16 electric vehicles plugged into the grid here in Canberra in offices or in garages of the ACT government. They noticed this drop in power supply and within seconds started to discharge power to the grid. And now as only 16 vehicles, they provided a very modest amount of that power that needed to be found to rebalance the exit of the coal plant. But it's a sign of the future when we'll have many more electric vehicles that can do this.
In fact, his paper says that if we could get 105,000 more of these cars responding in this way, that would fully cover the backup required for the whole of the ACT and New South Wales for a short burst. Now, at the moment, only Japanese EVs can put electricity back into the system, but Sternberg reckons this will actually, returning the power, will become a standard feature to save an electricity system here that's already so shonky that we're now paying big manufacturers to actually shut down when there's not enough power. So, intriguing scheme, until you apply this to the real world. I mean, say there are huge bushfires and they knock out the electricity lines, like the lines that went down and triggered Victoria's big blackout. Your EV, which you were charging at home, is suddenly drained to save the electricity system. And then the fires approach. What are you going to drive? Or maybe storms have triggered another blackout like this one in Victoria this year. The government drains your EV of power. Maybe that's not enough. There's still a blackout. And there you are with a car that won't move and nowhere to charge it. Again, what are you going to drive? And whose car is this really? Is it yours or for the governments to pilfer? And what next? Do they go around with the petrol cars next, siphoning the fuels from the tank while you're asleep? I mean, there's got to be an easier way to deal with our failing power system, surely. And the good news is Sternberg's paper accidentally hits on exactly that. And it's this: how about we just stop the Albanese government's ruinous push to make us buy electric cars rather than petrol ones? Because he doesn't say this, but Sternberg notes the astonishing drain of electricity just from charging a few thousand electric cars.
While power ended up being cut to 90,000 customers in Melbourne, the equivalent of that would have been to cut power, to stop electric vehicles charging, and you would only need 6,000 electric vehicles to have the same effect.
Wow, those 6,000 cars are gobbling up that much of our electricity already, enough to power 90,000 homes. But right now we have just under 200,000 EVs on our roads, but worse, under the government's plans to force us to buy even more, we should have anything up to 2 million EVs by 2030 by some estimates. 2 million. That's going to take a hell of a lot of electricity that we don't have. Isn't that going to make blackouts even more likely? And isn't using petrol cars, doesn't that actually sound easier and more sensible in the meantime? Is petrol really that bad?